Officer Grant was already in a foul mood. Long shift. Paperwork piling up. And now a vehicle was parked in a restricted zone, engine still running. He pulled his cruiser in behind the black SUV and stepped out, hand on his holster. He approached the window, tapping on the glass with the end of his flashlight. A woman inside calmly lowered the window and said, "Can I help you, officer?" Grant squinted. "This is a restricted area, ma'am. I need to see your license and registration, now." The woman reached slowly into her purse. "Absolutely. I'm just here on official business." Grant didn't let her finish. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. "Keep your hands where I can see them." She paused. "You don't want to do this." Grant stiffened. "Out. Now." She sighed and stepped out, moving slowly. She held up a sleek black wallet and flipped it open, revealing a golden badge and ID card. Special Agent Jordan Knight. FBI. Grant blinked. Then, without warning, Agent Jordan Knight didn't flinch. The barrel of Officer Grant's Glock was now aimed directly at her chest, his finger dangerously close to the trigger. Her eyes narrowed, calm but cutting. "You're pointing a weapon at a federal agent," she said evenly. "Lower it. Now." But Grant's adrenaline was surging. He'd already made the call in his head, she was bluffing. Fake badge. Too calm. No backup. Something felt off. And now, a crowd was starting to form at the edge of the sidewalk, phones out, recording. "Drop whatever trick you're trying to pull," he growled. "I said get on the ground." Agent Knight didn't budge. Instead, she calmly reached into her coat and pulled out her secondary credentials, the high-clearance kind, the type only carried by federal agents on special assignment. She held them up, slow and deliberate, letting the light reflect off the metallic emblem. "Read it carefully," she said. "You've got 5 seconds before this becomes a career-ending decision." Grant glanced. He froze. His lips parted slightly as the truth hit him. It was real. Her name. Her title. Her clearance. But instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "You think a badge gives you immunity?" he snapped, his voice cracking. "This is my jurisdiction. You're not above procedure." "Neither are you," she shot back. "Especially not when your service weapon is drawn without cause." Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the tension. "Grant! What the hell are you doing?" Everyone turned. From a black unmarked SUV, Police Chief Raymond Mendez stormed into the scene, eyes locked on Grant. The crowd parted as he shoved past bystanders. Grant immediately stepped back, gun lowering, but it was too late. Chief Mendez walked right up to him. "You pulled a weapon on her." He pointed at Agent Knight, who stood composed and silent. "She wasn't cooperating," Grant muttered, defensive now. "She's FBI, you idiot," Mendez snapped. "You're done." And then, in front of everyone, Chief Mendez reached for Grant's badge, ripped it off his chest, and threw it to the ground. The crowd gasped. Agent Knight didn't say a word. She just watched. The metallic clatter of Officer Grant's badge hitting the pavement echoed louder than any siren. Chief Mendez stood inches from him, chest heaving with restrained fury. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That's a federal agent under active clearance, on our turf, with pre-approved access. And you drew a weapon on her?" Grant was stunned. I didn't recognize." "You didn't ask," Mendez cut in. "You escalated." The chief turned to Agent Knight. "Agent, I sincerely apologize on behalf of this department. I was informed of your arrival earlier today. Your credentials were verified at HQ. You shouldn't have been stopped, much less threatened." Knight remained calm. It's not the first time something like this has happened during an interagency operation. But I didn't expect a weapon drawn before a single question was asked. Mendez clenched his jaw. It won't happen again. I'll make sure of it. Behind them, Grant stood frozen. His career, the years of patrol, the promotions he'd hoped for, was crumbling in seconds. Some of the bystanders were still recording. One even said quietly, "Bro, that just went viral." Grant looked down at the badge on the ground. "I didn't mean to, save it," Mendez snapped. "You're suspended immediately. Internal Affairs will be contacting you within the hour. I suggest you get a lawyer." Suddenly, a low voice from Knight's earpiece crackled. "Agent Knight, status check. We've detected activity near the target zone." She responded calmly, "I'm fine. Minor delay. Proceeding as planned." She nodded once at the chief. "I appreciate your intervention. But I'm on a clock." Mendez stepped aside. As she walked past, Grant turned slightly toward her, eyes clouded with regret. She paused for half a second and said quietly, "Next time, trust your training. Not your assumptions." Then she disappeared into the SUV, the vehicle peeling off down the street. Mendez looked down at the badge still lying on the asphalt. He didn't pick it up. "Let the next guy earn it," he muttered. By the next morning, the incident had already exploded across social media. Clips of the confrontation were on every platform, titled things like, "Cop pulls gun on FBI agent, gets badge ripped off in front of crowd, officer regrets everything after learning who she is." The department's phone lines were flooded. Reporters were calling non-stop. And Police Chief Raymond Mendez was already sitting in a closed-door meeting with city officials and legal advisors. "This isn't just a PR crisis," the city manager said flatly. "This is a federal relations disaster. We had a cooperation agreement with the FBI for this operation. And one of our own nearly torpedoed it." Mendez didn't flinch. "I already suspended Grant. Internal Affairs is on it." "Suspension won't be enough," another voice added. "The public wants accountability. And the feds, well, they're furious." Meanwhile, in a separate conference room across the city, Agent Jordan Knight was seated at a briefing table surrounded by her FBI task force. A large digital map was displayed behind her, showing heat signatures and encrypted zones. But the conversation wasn't just about the mission. Her supervisor, Special Agent in Charge Martin Wells, leaned forward. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Knight replied. "I've been in worse situations. But the fact that he went straight for his weapon, that's not protocol. That's panic." Wells nodded. "Washington's already seen the footage. We've been authorized to file an official grievance with the city. The Bureau isn't letting this slide." "I don't want a witch hunt," Knight said. "I want a precedent." "You might get both," Wells muttered. Back at the precinct, Officer Grant sat in an empty locker room, staring at his reflection. His badge was gone. His gun was turned in. He had no patrol, no uniform, no purpose. He replayed the moment over and over in his head, how he ignored the credentials, how he let his instincts override reason, how he failed. The door opened. Sergeant Elkins, a veteran officer, walked in. "You messed up," Elkins said bluntly. "But you better start thinking real hard about whether you want to fight this, or take responsibility." Grant didn't answer. But his silence said everything. That afternoon, the mayor held a press conference flanked by both Chief Mendez and a senior FBI representative. The air was tense. Reporters were already shouting questions before anyone reached the podium. Mayor Lillian Cortez raised her hand. "What happened yesterday was unacceptable. An FBI agent operating under full authorization was met with aggression, not cooperation. This city will not tolerate such breaches of protocol, or public trust." Chief Mendez took over next. His words were direct, unapologetic. "Officer Grant has been relieved of duty pending a full investigation. We are cooperating with federal authorities and re-examining our internal training policies. Let me be clear, this is not who we are. And this will not happen again. Then the FBI rep stepped forward, Assistant Director Carla Nguyen. Our agent showed restraint. Professionalism. Composure under pressure. We commend her for that. But we also expect systemic accountability. We're not just addressing one officer. We're addressing a pattern. The message was loud and clear, this wasn't being buried. Back at FBI Field HQ, Agent Knight watched the press conference on a wall-mounted screen, arms crossed, face unreadable. Her partner, Agent Malik Torres, leaned over. You made headlines. I didn't ask for them, she replied. He hesitated, then said, that officer, he's being dragged through the fire. Think he deserves it? Knight's jaw clenched slightly. He had a choice. He saw my ID, and still escalated. I didn't ask for his career to fall apart, but I also didn't ask to have a gun pointed at my chest while doing my job. Torres nodded, but the weight of it all lingered. Across town, Officer Grant sat at home in silence, blinds closed, TV off. He hadn't spoken to anyone, not even his brother, also a cop in the next precinct. His phone buzzed. A text. Internal Affairs. Report tomorrow at 9 a.m. He set the phone down, slowly. Then came a knock at the door. He opened it to find Chief Mendez standing there, no uniform, just a worn jacket and tired eyes. I'm not here to yell, Mendez said. I'm here to ask you something, what happened out there? Grant opened his mouth, but for once, no excuse came out. I panicked, he finally admitted. I saw something that didn't fit, and I assumed the worst. I thought I was protecting the scene. Mendez nodded slowly. You thought wrong. But this is your chance to own it. Or let it define you. Grant didn't answer right away. But the silence spoke louder than denial. The next morning, the halls of the Internal Affairs Division felt colder than usual. Officer Grant arrived right on time, no uniform, just a gray button-up and jeans. His badge and sidearm were already in evidence lockup. All he carried now was a folded statement in his pocket and a pit in his stomach. He was ushered into a sterile conference room where two IA investigators sat waiting. A department attorney was present, along with a court reporter and a digital recorder already blinking red. The lead investigator, Lieutenant Perez, didn't waste time. Officer Grant, you're here today regarding your conduct during an encounter with a federal agent. We have multiple civilian recordings, bodycam footage, and direct statements from both you and Agent Knight. Do you understand the seriousness of this hearing? I do, Grant said quietly. Before we begin, Perez said, do you wish to make a statement? Grant pulled the folded paper from his pocket, but after a moment, he set it aside. I'll speak from memory, he said. He looked them in the eye. I misjudged the situation. I didn't follow proper procedure. I let suspicion override training. And I drew my weapon on someone who wasn't a threat. I accept full responsibility for what I did. The room was silent. Perez scribbled a few notes, then looked up. You're aware this could result in permanent termination and loss of certification? Grant nodded. I am. Meanwhile, across town, Agent Knight was meeting with Assistant Director Nguyen and the legal liaison assigned to her case. They'd prepared a formal report on the incident and were debating whether to request a disciplinary recommendation from the city's oversight board. You've handled this professionally, Nguyen said. If you want us to push for decertification, we'll do it. We'll stand behind you. Knight was silent for a beat. I want accountability. Not revenge. The legal liaison raised an eyebrow. So no further action. Knight took a breath. Let the process finish. If they choose to keep him off the force, so be it. But I won't be the one pushing the button. Nguyen studied her for a moment, then nodded. Understood. Later that evening, Grant sat in his car outside the precinct, waiting for the official decision. He didn't know if he'd walk back into the force, or if that door was closed for good. When his phone rang, it wasn't internal affairs. It was Chief Mendez. Grant answered. "Yeah. IA will send the paperwork soon," Mendez said. "They're recommending revocation of your badge. But they're leaving the final call to the oversight board." "And you?" Grant asked, voice low. There was a pause. "I think you can still make things right," Mendez replied. "But not behind a badge." 2 weeks later, Officer Grant's name was officially removed from the department roster. The City Oversight Board voted unanimously to revoke his certification. No appeal. No future in uniform. What had taken years to build unraveled in a matter of days. But surprisingly, Grant didn't argue the decision. He signed the papers quietly. No press, no statement. He disappeared from the public eye. What the media didn't report, however, was where he went. A few precinct staffers whispered that he was seen visiting the families of people he'd once arrested, checking old reports, re-examining patterns. Rumor had it he started attending community forums anonymously, sitting in the back, just listening. Meanwhile, Agent Knight had moved on. Her undercover operation, the very one that had been jeopardized by the traffic stop, was finally producing results. The target, a cyberfinance ring operating under the guise of a logistics company, had been identified and surveilled. But something about it still gnawed at her. The breach in protocol hadn't just delayed her. It had exposed her. Her face was now known. Her cover compromised. And that meant one thing: she had to pull out before the takedown. The Bureau reassigned her, temporarily, to a teaching role at Quantico, training young agents in field protocol, scenario management, and threat assessment. Ironically, her most popular lecture. What to do when local law enforcement becomes the threat. She didn't mention Grant's name. Ever. But her tone always shifted during that portion. Back in the city, Chief Mendez faced increasing scrutiny. Internal memos leaked to the press showed that Agent Knight's stop wasn't the first time procedural lines had been crossed by officers under his watch. Community groups called for reform. Others called for his resignation. Instead, Mendez proposed something radical: a partnership program between local law enforcement and federal agents. Cross-training. Field simulations. Mandatory federal exposure courses for new recruits. He named the program Project Vanguard. And when asked during a press conference why he was pushing so hard for this initiative, Mendez gave a simple answer: because one mistake was enough. "I don't want a second." Then, to everyone's surprise, he added, "And the person helping me build this program was the same agent we failed that day." The media turned their heads, stunned. Because standing just off stage, in a black blazer and silent resolve, was Agent Jordan Knight. The announcement sent shockwaves through both agencies. Agent Jordan Knight, federal, composed, and fiercely principled, now standing as a public partner to a police chief whose department had nearly compromised her safety. Reporters scrambled for interviews. Commentators debated motives. But Jordan wasn't interested in press. She was interested in results. Behind the scenes, the work began immediately. Project Vanguard was more than a PR stunt, it was a complete overhaul. Knight and Mendez sat through long hours in the basement of City Hall, designing joint modules for crisis response, identity verification, and lawful de-escalation. The first module: recognize before you react. Every officer in the pilot program will be issued a federal ID handbook, Knight said to the initial training team. Not a poster on the wall. A literal, up-to-date, field-ready reference. Because if you don't know what you're looking at, you don't belong behind the badge. Mendez backed her up. And every officer who completes this program will shadow a federal agent for 1 week. You want that badge? You're going to know what it means to serve across lines. Enrollment was optional at first. But after the chief made it clear that promotions would be contingent on Vanguard certification, applications skyrocketed. Some called it excessive. Some called it overcorrecting. But a surprising number of officers, especially younger ones, called it overdue. One night, after an especially long strategy session, Mendez and Knight stood alone on the rooftop of the precinct, watching the city below. "You didn't have to do this," Mendez said. "You could have buried us." "I'm not interested in burying anyone," Knight replied. "I'm interested in preventing the next mistake. That day could have ended a lot worse." He nodded. "You think Grant would have taken this program seriously?" Knight didn't answer at first. Then finally, "I think, he would have had a chance to make a better choice." Back in his small apartment, Grant saw the press conference on TV. He didn't react. No bitterness. No excuses. But when he heard about Project Vanguard, something shifted in him. He opened his laptop, looked up the program, and scrolled to the bottom. There was a small note, "Civilian advisors welcome, especially former officers." He stared at it for a long time. Then clicked, "Apply." 3 weeks later, Jordan Knight walked into the Vanguard training facility, a repurposed gym in the city's old academy building. Recruits were already going through a simulation, a split-second decision-making drill using live actors and scenario prompts. She was about to head to the observation deck when one of the program coordinators flagged her down. "Agent Knight," he said, holding a clipboard, "there's someone here to see you. He signed up as a civilian advisor, and, well, we thought you should be the one to decide." She raised an eyebrow. "Name?" He hesitated. "Grant." Her stomach tightened, but she didn't flinch. "Where is he?" They led her into a quiet room just off the gym floor. And there he was, dressed in plain clothes, sitting in a chair with his hands folded in front of him. No badge. No pretense. Just a man. He stood when she entered. "Agent Knight," he said quietly. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." She didn't sit. "Not yet." "You applied to be part of Vanguard?" "I did," he said. "Not to justify what I did. Not to clean my name. I know what I lost. But I also know that if someone like me had gone through a program like this, things might have turned out different. For both of us." She studied him carefully. "No lectures?" she asked. "No, I didn't mean it, speech." Grant shook his head. "You don't need that. And I'm not here to be forgiven. I'm here to help fix what I broke." For the first time, her expression softened. Just slightly. "You'll be working under supervision," she said. "You'll sit in on every module, help identify blind spots, and if you even think about steering this into a pity campaign, you're out." "Understood." Night finally Saturday, then welcome to Vanguard. "You won't have a badge. But you'll have a purpose." He nodded once, firmly. "That's all I want." And for the first time since that chaotic day on the sidewalk, the air between them felt still. Not erased. Not healed. But redirected. Outside the room, new recruits shouted instructions as the next drill began. Simulations. Pressure. Decision-making under fire. But this time, they wouldn't be going in blind. They'd be ready. 6 months later, Project Vanguard was no longer a pilot, it was a blueprint. Police departments from across the state were requesting access to the curriculum. Federal agencies were praising the interagency collaboration. Incidents of field misidentification had dropped sharply in precincts where Vanguard training was implemented. And the city that once made headlines for a public embarrassment was now leading a national reform. Inside the training facility, a new class of recruits stood at attention, listening to closing remarks. Standing at the front of the room, Agent Jordan Knight. "You've learned the procedures," she said, voice clear and steady. "You've passed the tests. But none of that matters if you forget the reason this program exists. One moment of ego, of assumption, of unchecked authority, can end someone's life, career, or mission. Your job is not just to enforce the law. It's to protect the people who uphold it. She paused, letting the words settle. Then turned slightly to her right. From the side of the room, former Officer Grant stepped forward. Wearing a plain gray Vanguard-issued instructor badge, not of rank, but of responsibility. He looked at the recruits. "I didn't learn this lesson in training," he said. "I learned it the hard way. I thought I knew what authority looked like. I thought I knew how to read a situation. But I didn't. And because of that, I failed someone who was doing everything right." He gestured toward Knight. "She gave me a second chance, not to wear a badge, but to help others never make the same mistake." The room was silent. Focused. Listening. After the ceremony, as the recruits filed out, a young officer approached Grant. "You really lost everything, and still came back to help." Grant gave a faint smile. "Sometimes losing the badge is what teaches you what it really meant." As the sun set outside, casting golden light through the tall windows, Knight and Grant stood side by side watching the new generation walk out into the world. "You think they're ready?" he asked. Knight nodded. "They're more ready than we ever were." He looked at her. "No regrets?" She glanced sideways at him. "Not if it leads to change." And with that, they turned toward the doors, two unlikely allies, forged in conflict, united by purpose. Not defined by the past, but reshaping the future.